Thank you so much. It's so great to be here with you all today. So I'm Lawrence Korngut. I lead the adult neuromuscular clinic. Of course, Dr. Moss here from the pediatric neuromuscular clinic as well. And we, of course, provide care to a broad range of neuromuscular conditions. I think we follow about 5,000 patients with neuromuscular disease. And as part of our research program, we really pride ourselves about being able to provide access to cutting-edge therapies, and often that means through clinical trials. And as part of that, when I first started here, so I've been in Calgary on faculty for 10 years, we really felt there was a need to get organized. And this work was led by a large number of people across Canada, including Dr. Ma, Dr. Craig Campbell from London, Ontario, and myself. And so the work I'm going to share with you today is on behalf of really the whole community coming together and working together to get better organized, to enable clinical trials, to provide us with data that we can use for different purposes as a community. But certainly there's a ton of people who have spent a lot of time and thousands of patients who have contributed as well. So I'm very pleased to share this with you. I do have disclosures in terms of potential conflict of interest, but nothing that really relates to what I'm going to discuss with you today. We work very closely with our patient organization partners. We also work closely with pharmaceutical companies because that is where the majority of therapies come from, and that's who we have to collaborate with. And so that's reflected here. But again, I don't think it really impacts anything I'm speaking about. And I guess before I go further, I want to share this registry. This is a non-profit organization that we run, and it's meant to connect us all together and allow us to move forward and do meaningful things in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, along with all the other neuromuscular disorders that we see. But Jesse's journey has been there from day one, which is really remarkable. And that's in part why I'm so thrilled to be here today. So over the past 10 years, we have had one sponsor, and I'll show you we have different sponsors for different diseases, but we've had one sponsor that committed at the beginning, saw the vision, shared the vision, and has funded us for the last 10 years. And we are so grateful for that. It is so important to have steady hands in the community that are there when you need them. And so thank you to Jesse's journey for always being there for us and just being an amazing partner always. So what's a registry? So I'm going to keep this pretty straightforward, just so we're all on the same page of why are we even doing this and what is it? So to me, a patient registry is really a central platform that allows us all to connect and allows us to organize ourselves and allows us to collect information to help us move forward. And so there are different elements of a community that is interested in a disease like Duchenne. There's, of course, patients and families, which are generally at the center, and then there's clinicians, there's researchers, there's educators, there's allied health professionals, there's pharmaceutical companies, there's government, there's insurance companies, and there's all these different parts that you need. And the better these things all work together, the better the care and the better the quality of life of everybody, and particularly the patients and families involved. And so, when we talk about a registry, we think of it as a core element of everything that we do, and it allows us all to come together in one central place. So, making data available from what do these diseases look like. You heard, when we're designing clinical trials, the worst thing you can do is find a new therapy, design a badly designed clinical trial, run it, show that the drug doesn't work, even if it does, and say, well, that's too bad, I guess we'll move on to the next thing. And so in order, and you heard a little bit about this already in the previous talk, you need to be well organized. You need to know simple things like, how does Duchenne muscular dystrophy progress? Because there'll be variability between people, but you need to account for all of that when you're designing these clinical trials. So one of the diseases we're working with right now, facioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy, there are emerging therapies, but nobody knows how the disease progresses. We don't have good ways to measure it. We have no clue. Now, all that work has been done in Duchenne to a large extent, and so we're light years ahead. But you really need to lay that groundwork before you can go ahead and do a clinical trial, which is ultimately necessary to convince people and convince ourselves that these therapies work. And so I think we're all aware that we're in a really transformative era in neuromuscular disease. And so when you look at this from a patient or family perspective, it's never fast enough, right? The next therapy is never close enough, and we share that frustration as well. But if you look at it historically and you say, look what's happened over the last 100 years, even 3-4 years ago, we weren't where we are now. And things are moving much faster than ever. And to me, that's the source of hope. It isn't any one given therapy that is going to work. It's the fact that there are multiple being looked at through different mechanisms of action. And so I think we need to recognize that we really are in a transformative era. And we also need to recognize there's limitations of these clinical trials. As you know, there's, on average, if you look at society, only about 3% of patients with a given disease will even qualify for a clinical trial, right? And so 97% will not. So in the end, even if the therapy works, we know it works for that 3%, but we don't know about everybody else, right? And so most regulatory organizations like Health Canada, FDA will say, okay, let's assume it works for everybody else, unless we have reasons not to think. But it's really important to have that data, because what we're seeing now, and I'm speaking about the adult side, Dr. Ma's the pediatric expert, I deal with adults with these conditions. What we're seeing now is that the Health Canada will approve a therapy for everybody, but the insurance companies will only pay for people who look like that 3% in the clinical trial. And so, and often these are very difficult, very disabling, or even terminal diseases. And a great way to make the situation worse is you take a devastating disease without a therapy, and then you give it a therapy that people can't access. And that's even worse, right? You've just created you thought you couldn't create a worse situation, and then you did. And so we're seeing that. We're seeing that in ALS right now with the Darabone, and therapies that are very expensive and they're difficult to access. And the way we get around that is we show the data that this does work for everybody to then help the insurers come around and pay for these things, or the payers, or the governments, or whoever it is. And so this is important, impactful work that has very concrete impacts on what we do day to day and how people, folks like yourselves, live your lives. Another part of it is also, as a clinician, I want to be able to tell a patient and say, this is what we expect for you, right? You may not look like that 3% in the clinical trial, but this is what we expect for you. And having this kind of information is invaluable. These days, what we try to do is actually show the individual their own information before they started the therapy, after they started the therapy, and then they can make a decision for themselves, like, is this something I want to keep doing? Because not all of these things are completely benign. If you're getting an injection into your spinal fluid routinely, and you're requiring radiation through x-rays to get that done, it's not the most pleasant thing in the world. And these things occur differently in children as they do in adults, where adults have often more complications in terms of whether they develop heart disease or other things that sort of bring on risk. And so here's a nice slide of our partners across the country, and this is really where the registry occurs. It's that partnership between patients and their clinicians. We have 30 clinics right now, with 8 coming on board, 55 investigators with 9 new ones coming on board, and so we've really grown over the last 10 years, and it really is a wonderful collaborative group. What I'm very proud of, as we'll talk about, is we're very eager to share the information and share the data. And so this isn't, we get the data, it becomes secret, and then we try to get the greatest publication in the world. Nobody really cares about that. What we care about is getting the data out there so that people can move forward with whatever research they're doing, whether they're a researcher, a community, a patient organization, a pharmaceutical company. And so currently we actually have over 4,400, this was I think a week ago when I sent this, 4,400 patients from 10 provinces and territories, and you can see obviously the cluster around the major urban cities, and we have 560 Duchenne and Becker muscular dystrophy individuals in the database as well. So this is sizable, right? This is sizable. And so why participate? Why are we doing this? Why do we spend the time? Why do we spend the resources? And why would you register? What is the contribution here? I would say that it takes very, very little time from the patient perspective, because you just have to sign the form, and then everything else happens in the background. There's no visits. There's no forms to fill out. You may just get occasional letters in the mail from us suggesting different opportunities for you to be aware of, to consider, but you're of course not consenting to those. Those are separate things. Those may be clinical trials, or there may even be surveys to fill out because they're trying to facilitate learning from other organizations. But ultimately, the whole point of this is to improve lives, to improve quality of life, whether it be through helping new therapies become developed, or helping advocacy, or helping something. That's the whole point of this. Part of it is doing research, and so much of what we do is try to figure out how do these diseases even progress, because as you know, no two people are the same, even with the same condition. And so statistically, we have to figure out how do we deal with that when we design clinical trials, when we follow people after clinical trials are complete, but also standards of care. Are we following the standards of care? Could we be doing better? Are all the clinics behaving the same across the country? Is there differences? And they're not the same. We are seeing sometimes major differences across the country. For example, if you have ALS, so again, I'm an adult neurologist, so I'm going to give you an adult example, but if you have ALS, the average survival of the disease is 3 years from the beginning of the disease. If you're in Ontario, if you're in Quebec, it will take you 12 months to get a diagnosis from the time you develop symptoms. In Ontario, it's 24 months, right? Most clinical trials will not permit patients in ALS after 24 months in the trial, so half the patients in Ontario will never have a chance at a clinical trial, right? So then that data allows us to go and try to figure out what is it? Is it at the family physician stage? Is it access to family care? Is it, what is it? And so that's the projects we're working on, but these are major discrepancies. And that's just one disease. This exists in other diseases as well. Clinical trials. So how do we bring a global, or typically US, most clinical trials are run in the US, how do we attract them to Canada? Well, we attract them to Canada by saying, hey, we're 30% cheaper to conduct clinical trials here. B, we have highly motivated patients and families to participate in clinical trials, but also by being organized, right? Ultimately, these companies are businesses, and they know that if you enter a well-organized community, it will be a shorter time period to recruit patients into that clinical trial because the doctors are organized. The doctors are focused on this. The families are committed to at least hearing about it. You don't have to participate in a given trial, but at least if you're aware of it, there's an opportunity. And in the end, what that does is speeds up the development of the therapy. You get a quicker answer, and frankly, it saves money for the company because it doesn't take as long to finish everything up. And so we do feasibility studies where a company will come to Canada and will say, look, we're interested in X disease. How many patients do you have? Where are they? So we're very careful not to give out any information that could be identifying or anything like that, but we can say, look, Toronto area, Ontario, Southern Ontario, usually we stick to big regions like this. We can say there's this many patients, and they can even say, what about this genetic mutation? Our drug only works for this type of genetic mutation. We can actually screen the database by that and say, look, this is how many patients. And usually we're able to give them a number that's much higher than they expected, and then they get even more excited about coming to Canada. And then we've done our job because we've created an opportunity for people to participate in the study if that's what they like to do. So that's how these feasibility study works. And of course, creating opportunity. This is what this is about, is creating opportunities for patients and families, creating opportunities for researchers to connect and do things together and move research forward. These are rare diseases, so it's very difficult to do a study at one center, right? If there's only a handful of patients, 30, 40, 50 patients, when you're looking for hundreds. And so trying to put that all together. There's opportunities for information and education. Now, in certain neuromuscular diseases where we have approved therapies that are thought to be highly effective, we're able to track this. And again, if a therapy is proven to be highly effective, but it's only in 3% of the population, we then need to expand that and say, look, other people who look differently it also works for, so that the payers will pay for the drug, that they will pay for the therapy, that we will improve access. And we're actively doing this in diseases like spinal muscular atrophy. We're actively doing this in diseases like ALS. And the hope is, as more therapies come out, there's more opportunity to help in that way as well. And so, 4,500 patients is a large number for a neuromuscular registry around the world. But what I'm even more proud of is the number of projects that have been run. So these are projects where people come to the registry and they say, we'd like your information. We'd like your information to do X and Y, or we'd like to, look at doing a clinical trial in Canada, or we'd like to learn something from the data inside the database. We have very rigorous procedures that are available where this is then reviewed by the heads of the clinics across Canada. So every project is reviewed by the clinicians. We've never said no because we're very clear about what the rules are. And so of course, we can't give you personal information. We don't do marketing. We don't do advertising, things like this. And so we don't get these type of inquiries. People are understanding of what we do. But we've had over 120 of them, which is a ton. That's a lot for any registry. And so we're very, very proud of that. And so this is Duchenne. So this is the number of projects by year. You can see we're in a banner year already, and we're hoping to complete a few more before the end of the year. So these are surveys, how many we've sent out. This is data requests from researchers, informational mailouts, and then clinical trial inquiries. So these are solid numbers for Duchenne. And so I hope to you the value is there in terms of what we're able to do. Now, of course, this in part is dependent on what's going on in the world. If it's a slow year and there's no trial or something, then these numbers will change. But more recently, as we brought more staff on, we're able to more actively solicit and say, hey, where can we be helpful? What can we do for you to build those partnerships? And really, the dream has always been to make Canada a leading place to do clinical research in Duchenne and other neuromuscular diseases, because again, it creates opportunity for the community to participate in these things. So clinical trial notifications. We did a global drug preferences survey, healthcare practitioner survey on airway clearance and prescription and recommendations for neuromuscular patients. Some of you may have received an invitation to this forum through the registry. And then publishing the work and sharing it with the world. In fact, any researcher or any organization can request data from the registry, so it's not limited to doctors or Canadians even. And so we are eager to give de-identified, so again, nobody knows who the individuals are, data that allows research to happen regardless of who it is. But as you can see here, we've had some successful publications in different diseases, looking at patients in our database. And this is that publication I just mentioned. So last year we published the differences in diagnosis and care of ALS across Canada. And here you can see, so this is mean time of symptom onset to diagnosis, and then by province. And there's quite a spread. And this difference between 24 months in Ontario and 12 months or so in Quebec, was a bit of an eye-opener in terms of what that means. But we found all sorts of other differences, even patients who have, where patients don't have access to therapies that we do know slow down ALS. In British Columbia, only a quarter of patients are on such therapies. Alberta, it's 50%. The rest of Canada, it's 80%. Right? So these are huge. And it all comes down to what are the criteria from your provincial insurer to access these therapies, right? And so we need to look forward. We want to develop cutting-edge therapies. We want to change the disease through these therapies and prolong life and improve quality of life. But we also need to make it available, right? And everybody's sort of focused often in a given disease about where's the cure, where's the therapy, but there's so many things that then happen. For example, a therapy can get approved in the US and they take 2 years before it gets approved in Canada. And so how do we advocate for these things? How do we show that this is a major problem in Canada that deserves everybody's attention? And then we can look at interesting things. So this is just, simple things like driving time to clinic. We can look at, different diagnosis and how long it takes folks to drive to clinic. And we know that in certain areas in Manitoba, people are driving hours and hours each way to see their neuromuscular specialist. And so this also helps with trying to figure out where do we need to put resources to support families to get to see their doctor and such things. And so this is very, very useful information. And it doesn't have to be sort of groundbreaking research necessarily in terms of a cure, but it can be the practical elements that impair people to live their best possible life routinely, or even to access physicians. I mean, there are places in Canada where people do not see a specialist because they just cannot physically access them. And certainly, we want to address that as much as possible. And then we also work globally. So we're highly collaborative, and anybody who wants to collaborate, we generally collaborate. And so TreatNMD is the global neuromuscular network. And so this was a study where there was analysis of more than 7,000 Duchenne muscular dystrophy mutations. Another study here looking at over 5,000 patients with muscular dystrophy. And the learnings from these studies are completely different than the really small studies, 100 patients or 50 patients or something. You really get incredible insights as to how these diseases progress over time, when you add up individuals with Duchenne on a global level. And so the nice thing is the CNDR is an access point where then we can collaborate globally using this information as well. For other diseases right now, we're just about to publish our methods for our National Spinal Muscular Atrophy Registry. As you may know, there's 2 approved and another one coming therapies for spinal muscular atrophy that are really transformational, game-changing therapies. But again, the problem is, for example, for Spinraza, the evidence, the clinical trials are only up to about age 12 for children, but everybody in my clinic is over age 18, right? And so people are desperate to try the therapy, but their insurers don't want to pay for it because they say, well, it's only proven up to age 12, so why would we pay for that? And so the way we do that is we track as many people as possible, including those who are actually able to get the therapy one way or the other, to show that there's a difference, right? And that's not a clinical trial, but it's often good enough to make the point that this is reasonable, to fund. And of course, what's been interesting to see is that Canada and our team, our group nationally, in many ways leads the world, as evidenced by Victoria Hodgkinson, who couldn't join us today, but she's our project manager that runs the Canadian Neuromuscular Disease Registry, and she's leading global efforts in spinal muscular atrophy. And so it's nice for us to be able to lead the way, because ultimately we want that to then feed back and give us the best chance of being helpful to the community. And so there's a couple things we're working on. We're looking at doing a better job of patient engagement. So now we have the technology where we can better communicate with individuals in the registry. So right now we're at the stage we're trying to get a sense of how much do you want us to communicate with you? I'm sure you don't want this to be a daily thing, but how, are you willing to give us information? How often? How much of your time? What kind of things? And we're trying to get a sense of that before we do anything. Part of this will be part of our direct-to-patient platform, which you'll be able to access our surveys, information. Perhaps there's clinical trials that you might qualify for that we can notify you. And instead of getting a letter in the mail, this would just be, go straight to your smartphone or your email. This allows to do longer-term follow-up for clinical trials. And as new therapies come to market, often a condition of the approval is that academic tracks the outcomes for the disease, just to make sure it's working as well as the clinical trial showed, and that there's no risks that the clinical trial failed to identify because there wasn't enough patients. So we're collaborating on those kind of projects. And then access to technology aids for those affected by Duchenne. And so lots of things coming up. And so how do you participate? So as I mentioned, it's simply the simple process is you sign an informed consent form. So of course you need to understand what this involves, and what it involves is, if folks are agreeable, you sign the informed consent form, and we have them on the back table there. There's an information sheet, and there's actually a consent form there as well. And you don't have to sign it today, but if you're interested, just take it with you, read it over. There's a number to call us. We'll answer any questions you have, and then if you're interested, you can sign it, have somebody witness it, and just mail it to us, and that's it. And that's all you actually have to do. What we then do is we have staff that go into the clinics, take the charts, and take the medical information and put it in the database. The database is managed through the University of Calgary, so this is all, as I mentioned, academic work, and so it's all governed by the University of Calgary and the different university partners across the country through our ethics committee. So we have very strict rules, guidelines. Security controls are the same as your banking account, your online banking account. It goes through that same process. And then you do have the opportunity to choose. You can sort of give your information through this process, but you can also choose, yes, I want to receive information from the CNDR to look at different opportunities. And we can't guarantee you'll get a letter from us, but certainly if there's something that fits or could fit, you may well. And then you can choose whether you want to complete questionnaires on your health or quality of life. And then you can also choose whether we can share your de-identified information, meaning nobody will know whose information this is, but with our global partners like the Treat and MD Registry. And so we have a team of very dedicated people. As I mentioned, there's a large number of researchers, clinicians across the country, an even larger number of very committed patients who have given their time to us to consent and sometimes fill out surveys and things. And then of course our staff, which I'll highlight. We're eager to engage partners, patient organizations to help their great work, as well as pharmaceutical companies to help their work in terms of speeding up these therapies to come to market. We focus on research at a national level to improve patient care and outcomes. And I think we all take pride in helping build this community that we all have, so we can all do this together. And so this is Victoria, who leads the registry, along with Saeed over here, and that's the rest of my research team. There's our Duchenne leaders across the country, and Dr. Ma is sitting at the back, so we're grateful for her time. And again, you can see the sponsors here who we've had over the years, but there's only been one that's been there from the beginning and always there for us, and we're so deeply grateful to Jesse's journey for that. And so I'll take any questions that anybody may have.